All right, cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go pretty lax on this one, so it's gonna be up to
Same.
you. Here we go.
Oh, fuck. I was hoping this would be up to you. Listen, I went hard on Christmas Carol. This was your turn. Fuck.
If it was Batman, How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
How the Batman Stole Christmas. We would have been
Yes.
great. The Grinch is a lot like the Joker, actually. He just thrives on chaos.
Welcome back to the PolitiPop podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I am your co-host, Mike Booch, a.k.a. Comrade Soyboy, a.k.a. the Soyboy Pseudo-Intellectual, and in the second seat, as always, is my co-host, Ty.
Hey, what's going on?
You know what? If you guys are listening to this on YouTube or wherever, do whatever you want. If you want to like the video and subscribe, do it. If you want to leave us a 1-star review, at least you're leaving us a review. If you want, this one's for us, all right?
Yeah, this is our last one of the year, man. This is it.
That is, well, technically, is it our first one of the year?
Oh, I guess it is, right?
We're recording our last episode of the year, but within the same week, we'll be releasing the first one of 2021. It's going to be the Grinch.
Oh,
when
man.
people go, you know what, I have a resolution and I'm going to start listening to a new podcast. I'm going to start, doing something with myself and learning things. And they're going to, the PolitiPop podcast. I like movies. I like, I want to learn about politics. Let me see. And they're going to listen to this fucking episode, the Grinch one. It's going to be the worst one we've ever had. And they're going to be like, oh, you should disagree. Good. I'm glad you believe in it, Ty.
This is going to be our best one. Well, maybe not our best one, but it'll be good.
Hey, we're gonna have a good time. But yeah, this one's for us. So listen, you could look us up and you'll find our contact info there. You'll find out how you can review us and become a patron if you want and all that other stuff. But like we said, we're Ty and Booch and Ty. We're here to review Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Wow, it's exciting. And yes,
Christmas
is over. But as the new year is still part of the holiday, I thought it would be fun to cap it out with a fun one. And you had brought up doing the Grinch for the last month, so I think it was meant to be.
I might have been pulling your ear a little bit, trying to see if you could do the Grinch. If your heart would grow 2 sizes.
We almost did a Grinch every week, but instead we're going to do one episode on the Grinch, and I think that's probably for the best.
That's right. So Ty, before we take a trip to Boston to learn about the Green Monster, I'm hearing a little something in the background. What is that, Ty?
I fear it might be the spoiler warning.
That's right. It is the spoiler warning coming through the cold winter air, just like the caroling of the Who's in Whoville down on Mount Crumpet. No, he lives on Mount Crumpet. Whatever. Either way, there's a spoiler warning in effect. All right, there's a spoiler warning, and we're gonna talk about all 3 adaptations. There's 4 adaptations, including the book. We're gonna talk about all visual adaptation. No, the book's also a visual adaptation. What would you call it?
All movie adaptations of. Are we talking about the book too, or?
Well, I mean, I didn't read the book. Did you?
Oh, I have in the past. We're speaking about every version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, but not the Halloween one, which is not about Christmas, so that's fine.
Hold on. What do you mean the Halloween one? Can we go back there?
There's a Grinch movie about Halloween. It's called like Halloween is Grinch Time or something like that.
Tell me more about it.
I swear to you, it's real. Halloween is a Grinch night. I've never even seen it.
You've never seen it?
It's from 1977, and I don't know where you can even see it.
All right, we're going to have to find that out. We're going to have to put it in the show notes because now I want to know about it. I want to know, do the Who's lose their power in the Halloween time and he gets more powerful?
A strange wind blows into Whoville, making them all stay indoors. And that means the Grinch will be a foul mood and out to do harm.
Oh.
And that kind of...
Wow. So
yeah.
Serial killing. That's
Yeah, he learned no lessons from Christmas, so now he's here to fuck up your Halloween.
Well, it sounds like literally Halloween and the Grinch combined. I was actually thinking before, like, what if Rob Zombie did a Grinch story? Because, like, that's where they're going. As they progress, we learn more and more about his tragic origin. So eventually, like...
Depending on the version.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gets more and more tragic as they go along. I mean, like, by the time 2030 hits,
it really does.
It's going to be the Rob Zombie Grinch version. And he's going to be there, like, just wearing flannel and getting, bottles busted upside of his head by his abusive stepdad.
This is Rob Zombie we're talking
about.
It
is definitely Rob Zombie. And Danny Trejo would be there as Mrs. Grinch. She'd be like, hey, stop beating my son,
This is definitely an outtake, but it's so good.
Who knows? We'll see what mood I'm in when I edit it.
Only Whoville will know.
But yeah, so Ty, while there are many different versions of the Grinch, there's one overarching story told through all three of them. So in your best way, give us the plot of how the Grinch stole Christmas.
Now, if I were reading off of IMDb.com, I would say How the Grinch Stole Christmas. A grumpy hermit hatches a plan to steal Christmas from the Who's of Whoville.
I'm sorry, did you say Grumpy Herman or Grumpy Hermit?
A grumpy hermit.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I heard Grumpy Herman. But
he could be.
That's if you were reading from IMDb. What would you say?
Yes.
What would you say the plot is, Ty? You know better than some
I would
rando
say
on IMDb?
A grumpy hermit hatches a plan to steal Christmas from the Who's of Whoville, but learns a valuable lesson along the way.
Holy shit, that's way better. That's incredible. I would definitely describe the Grinch as a grumpy hermit.
I mean, I think it's important to talk about the fact that this is a Dr. Seuss book, right? And Dr. Seuss was an integral part of many, many children growing up, right? He's known for his rhyming and his stories that have, a message in them. And he tries to teach lessons to young kids through, a funny and kind of strange series of events in all of his books.
Also, like Common, the rapper, just trying to preach a message, really great with his rhyming and trying to help the youth. Dr. Seuss.
There you go, man.
Yes.
Perfect. So, The Grinch was his Christmas story. The book is a classic, and it was adapted into an animated film in 1966, which is 26 minutes long. It's not very long, but it follows the book to a T. And it tells the story of this weird green creature who is just so angry and upset. And then, they did adapt it into a live-action film in 2000. With the wonderful
Jim Carrey in the lead role.
Jim Carrey, thank you. Yes, Jim Carrey's the lead
That's what I'm
role
here for.
because in the 90s and early 2000s he was all about it. And then there was a new version that came out in 2018, which was again animated with Benedict Cumberbatch playing the Grinch. Yeah, and it's I think it teaches a really valuable lesson. It's kind of fun and silly. There's some really iconic music from there. If you turn on any Christmas station in December, you're going to hear some Grinch music come on. It's definitely... I think just about everyone has seen it. But if you haven't, you got a lot of versions that you could try to get through. So
yeah, you have a lot to choose from. And I think each version is accessible from its own different lens.
Yeah. The original, what's kind of cool is Boris Karloff actually narrated it.
Ooh.
From the iconic Universal monster movies. So, the original stands up really well. It's a classic. I watch it every December. But with the one thing that they don't do super well in that version, as it is, an exact replica of the book, they don't really give you a reason for why the Grinch is the way he is.
No one quite knows the reason.
They say that he, maybe it's because his head's, his head's twisted on too tight, or his shoes are too tight, or something, right? Like his heart's two sizes too small. Like
right, his shoes are
there you
too
go.
tight, and the heart, it might be two sizes too small. He may have a cardiovascular condition.
As we joked earlier, later on in the other versions, they start giving him more sympathetic reasons. Part of this is probably to pad the movie so it can be a little bit longer and be a feature film. But it also gives you a reason to kind of root for the Grinch. And I think he's an interesting character to kind of dissect, right? Like, he does some pretty horrible stuff. Like, his whole goal is to ruin Christmas for this entire town of people that, according to the original, has never done him wrong. And by making him more sympathetic in later versions, they want you to feel bad for him. And as we've said in other reviews and other movies, I think this is an explanation for his actions, but not an excuse, right? Because he's still trying to do something horrible.
Yeah, even though some people may view the Grinch as the most oppressed character in the film, depending on which adaptation you watch, coming from an inauspicious start and being independently wealthy just based on the living setup he has. Yeah, they definitely do make the Grinch a lot more relatable and sympathetic as the films progress. Originally it just seemed he didn't like the Who's, he didn't like the Christmas season.
He was pure evil.
Yeah.
His heart was too small. He was Michael Myers.
Exactly.
He really was. He was just born that way.
When I saw the Grinch, there was nothing left behind those eyes. Nothing but evil. I didn't come into this today thinking I would make so many Halloween references to the Grinch, but here we stand. But yeah, the story as a whole is that what turns him around is that he sees the Who's aren't guided by greed overall. It turns out they're actually guided by the spirit of the Christmas season and togetherness and family and appreciating each other's time and presence. By that I mean
the Christmas vibe.
Yeah, their presence. Yeah, of course, all about the vibes. The vibes turn Grinch around. Now, it's interesting because the story as a whole does seem to promote anti-consumerism as we've seen in a lot of Christmas movies in general. Like, it somehow manages to get more commercialized every year, at least as far as I can see. Yet every movie to do with Christmas continues to tell people that it's all about family and not about presents. And I really wonder why that is. Like, it does preach a Dickens-like story in which, Grinch is the miser who hates Christmas and seeks to do others wrong, except he's actively doing wrong, whereas Scrooge was doing wrong by not intervening.
Yeah. I mean, the Grinch, he decides he's going to actually go out and ruin Christmas. Like, that's going to be his actions for the year, because he doesn't want to see this happiness, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He sees how happy the Who's are down in Whoville. He doesn't even live there, and yet he wants to destroy it. Now, in the 2000 live action version, it is revealed that he at one time lived in Whoville. I believe he, accidentally wound up there. He was supposed to go to a different town, right? And he was dropped off there, stork style, into Whoville.
Right outside of a swinger party, I would like to mention. So right there, my 2 cents on the Ron Howard or live action or 2000 or Jim Carrey Grinch, whatever you want to call it, is that I think it holds up as just being genuinely funny. Like, there are a lot of very mature jokes that they put in there. I'm not sure if they sneak them in there very well. I really can't be too sure. But I do think it holds up as far as just being a genuinely funny movie. And the Grinch, he actually lands right outside of a swinger party, and everyone's so busy trading car keys and going home with different people to have sex with that they don't notice he's out there. And I guess that's where his heart condition comes from. So that's the origin. This is the Rob Zombie version. They're having a sex party, and they're in there dancing to Dracula, not paying attention, and he becomes cold-hearted because his heart shrank out in the cold.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was received critically too well, but it's still considered a classic. People watch it every year, myself included. And
the 2000
it's a little weird.
Yeah,
as a live action, just because of how strange everyone is dressed and looks, and there's kind of a weirdness to it.
Yeah, it was a very stylized film.
Yeah, Jim Carrey really hams it up, and he's quite good in the role. And yeah, it's definitely an adult version of it. He's bullied, right, severely as a kid, like really horribly, to the point where he literally has an angry outbreak, and starts destroying things in the town, which eventually leads to him, exiling out to the mountains and growing, angry and bitter there.
Something like that happened to me when I was 10.
Yeah, exactly. That happened to you too. So we called you a Grinch.
All the kids were making fun of me because I was wearing the same pair of pants more than one day in a row. And they were like, why don't you change your pants? I was like, I didn't know I had to. I'm like, I changed my underwear. And they're like, ew, underwear? Like, just the mention of it. And I was like, I just started yelling at this fucking kid. Like, Mike Altavilla, I think was his name. we graduated with him.
Boy.
I'm pretty sure. But yeah, I fucking yelled at him.
I don't remember.
But anyway,
him.
the point is, I'm saying I understand where the Grinch is coming from.
Yeah, it's sad, you know, he had to endure that, and it obviously really put him in a bad place.
However, yeah, bad place indeed, because later on we see him actively trying to murder children.
Oh, really? In the live action one?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason he doesn't let Cindy Lou Who die in that like machine at the post office is because Max tugs at him. Like, Max is his conscience. He wouldn't do, he wouldn't do any of the slightly good deeds that make him somewhat redeemable. Like, I think the most redeemable version of the Grinch is the 1966 version, because without having, does he go into the town beforehand? I don't think he does. Yeah,
no,
exactly.
No.
So he just goes into the town to steal Christmas. He's not going in there causing, accidents to happen, fucking up people's days. It is interesting that we do find a redeemable version of the Grinch in both the 2000 and 2017 or 18 version.
2018.
The 2018 version. And the 2018 version also, when Benedict Cumberbatch gets behind the Grinch, he's taking jelly that short women can't grab and throwing it on the ground, or making it shatter,
ruining kids' snowman, right?
Yeah.
Like he enjoys making people feel bad. And I did think it was interesting that he has to go into town in that version to get food and supplies. He's forced to go in there. And there's even like a who thinks they're friends, and he just keeps fucking with the guy, and the guy just thinks he's like, oh, you silly Grinch, And the Grinch just hates them all, and he like you said, he actively does wrong to these people, which eventually leads to him deciding to completely ruin Christmas by literally dressing up as Santa Claus in all three versions, in the book included. He decides to dress up as Santa Claus, go into town, steal all the presents and all the trees and pretty much everything that they've put up for decorations, and have them all wake up to a completely, horrible Christmas. And that's his plan in all versions.
And in the original version, the Who's come to their own reckoning about what Christmas is about on their own, it seems. They already had the spirit of Christmas within them, so they don't need to worry about the gifts. They start singing on their own. When we get to the 2000 version, we see that it's actually Cindy Lou who needs to tell everybody what the deal is. Like, everybody's coming down on her father because she was the one who wanted to reach out to the Grinch. She's the one who wanted to be nice to him. She's the one who wanted him to witness how great Christmas is by being a part of it. And
she nominates him to be the Cheermeister.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the Cheermeister that year. That's right. Also they have Jeffrey Tambor's character perform analingus on a dog in that. Just reminding everyone.
What?
Yeah. Did you not watch the same movie I watched?
I actually didn't get to watch the live action this year. I watched the other two.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. So that's
sorry.
fine.
So sorry.
And guess what? A couple years ago, I saw the one they were doing at the Hulu Theater at MSG back before there was an apocalypse. So,
oh, wow.
If you want to know actually, it was a really good story because the whole thing was told from the perspective of old Max. So he's the narrator. They broke their trend of having murderers narrate it. You had Boris Karloff, who was a big time horror guy. Then you had Anthony Hopkins in the 2001, who was Hannibal Lecter. But in this one, you just have old Max, and he's narrating it. And obviously the thing's a musical. I can't speak much to that, but I thought it was really cool that that everything's told from his perspective. And by the end of the story, he's like, oh, I'll never forget, blah blah blah. He's like, I'm going off. Basically, he has to go off to fucking die. That's how the story ends. But he's like, basically the Grinch was a friend to everybody. They give him the Scrooge treatment, and he's like, I've never known a better friend all my days. Boopity boop.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, in all these versions, Cindy Lou Who is kind of the one that awakens something in the Grinch, right? She reaches out to him and kind of warms his heart and literally makes it grow 2 sizes larger, through her kindness. And in each version, that relationship between them changes a little bit. Like you said, in the 2000 version, she reaches out to him and wants him to come to town and be a part of it. In the 2018 one, when he breaks into her house and he finds out that all she wants is for her mother to be happy, she doesn't care about the presents, that kind of awakens something in him. So she's, an interesting character. She's just a little girl, but she really believes in doing right, and the spirit of Christmas, and that's a very great trait of hers. But I do think that Max, like you said, is kind of the Grinch's conscience, and he doesn't get as much love as he probably should. He's he's the Grinch's sidekick, but he's also a loyal and faithful friend, and he really enjoys being around the Grinch. And the 2018 one, he's got a little picture of them right next to his bed. And the Grinch is kind of a dick to him like the whole time, but at the same time you realize, I think watching it, that the Grinch would be really lonely without him. Max is kind of his servant and friend and partner, and he becomes his reindeer, right, when he does his whole Santa Claus act.
How much of their relationship do you think is abusive, by the way?
It depends on the version. I mean, he's definitely an abusive person, so yeah.
Yeah, I think the 2000 version had some pretty clear examples. Can I talk a bit about the 2018 one, because it turns out that when I went to see it 2 years ago in theaters, I actually took notes on it while I was at the theater.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow. You just knew this day would come.
I said he's an asshole. I did think it was interesting that this time Cindy Lou Who comes from a single mother household.
Yes.
Like you said, her whole thing about Christmas is she wants her mother to be happy. More specifically, she wants her mom to not be lonely anymore. For one reason or another, Cindy Lou Who is without a father, and the mom is raising her and her 2 kids. She's taking public transportation. She's working. They really seem to modernize what a family looks like in this one, instead of giving her the nuclear family that they did in the 2000 one.
Not only that, but they actually make everyone look like regular people for the most part. Like, they don't look like these like weird like animal hybrid humans.
Yeah, these creatures with very long snouts. Yeah.
I also just want to point out that whenever she kept bringing up the fact that her mom was lonely, I thought she was trying to get the Grinch to fuck her mom. Like, that was how it was gonna end.
Was she not trying to get the Grinch to fuck her mom? That's how I read it.
I mean, in the end, I think successfully that's what's going to happen, but I don't know if that was her intention when she was going to ask Santa Claus for something. So.
Oh, they also make it a point to show that Cindy Lou Who is kind of a badass, right? That she plays hockey.
Yeah.
She's kind of the leader out of all of her friends. There's a bit of cultural appropriation. It seems like they're from the streets, that, they back each other up no matter what. They literally play Christmas Time in Hollis at one point when they're on their big wheels. Interesting note also was the Grinch. He seems to avoid his friends and stress eat, so very, very relatable.
Yeah.
I was wondering if he had any investments, because it doesn't seem like he's living in a dump this time. Like, he has a whole setup within this mountain.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, no one's going to that mountain, right? The Who's never seemed to travel that way. They kind of stay off of it, so I mean, he can do whatever he wants, I guess.
So, they don't have to worry about much, like, I guess, land ownership.
No, so like, you mentioned that he is kind of despicable in all versions, and in the 2018 one he is, but there are moments where he starts to show a bit of kindness even earlier, before he meets Cindy Lou Who. He goes after a reindeer, right? He wants to get reindeer for his sleigh, and he can only get one. Fred, I think his name is, right? He's like this big, kind of heavy set reindeer.
Yes.
And he kind of befriends him, and he's going to use him for his goals. And then Fred's family shows up, right? His wife and child, and the Grinch actually lets him go. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That was still pretty early before he even gets to the town to steal Christmas, and he makes this decision to let Fred go. And that winds up actually, if you ever played Resident Evil 4, where you can save like that wolf that has his paws stuck. That's all I can think of, because in the end, Fred comes back and saves his bacon when he's like about to go over the edge, right?
That's right.
And,
yes.
Fred saves the day, and he's like, Fred! Like, Fred's there with his family and everything, and he saves the Grinch's life, and he saves Christmas from being ruined. So that was this good act that he finally does actually comes back to repay him, and shows that a good deed can really help out.
which not directly related, but we said last episode too that the whole point of A Christmas Carol was to show that maybe not in the afterlife is when when you get your rewards for helping people. It can be in real life, during while you're alive, and that is something that the the Grinch has here. They don't obviously they don't really have a religious theme. However, the caroling Who's do sing a song involving Christ in it, which I thought was interesting because they've never acknowledged Christ in the Grinch lore before that. But yeah, I think it's also interesting that we find out Grinch's main motivation here, or the reason why he is what he is because he never got to have a family, and when he begrudges anyone who does, but he also gives what was the reindeer's name again? Not Max, Fred, right?
Fred.
Yeah, so he lets Fred have what he wasn't able to have. And I think he also sees in Cindy Lou Who, maybe, not everybody else, maybe not everyone who has a family has the family I'm thinking I'm missing out on. Like, we all fucking struggle here. And Bricklebum was the one who was also in the orphanage with him?
I think so. That's the one that he thinks they're friends.
Yeah. I think his name was Bricklebum. But yeah, he was also in the orphanage as a kid, and it turns out that he grew up to be, like, the happiest dude ever.
Yeah, he loves Christmas. He loves everybody. He's like the nicest who you'll ever meet.
It's interesting how they showed two people take two very, very different courses here. They didn't do the bullying arc in the 2018 one, right?
No, they just had him. The fact that he was an orphan, and literally, I guess, the orphanage didn't celebrate Christmas with him. They didn't give him any presents. They didn't have a tree. He sat there in the dark. While everyone else celebrated, which was. Probably child abuse on that orphanage, but
yeah, probably. They're like, oh, he's green.
Yeah, they didn't go into like you said, the bullying was much more extravagant in the 2000 version. Like, and even as an adult, the mayor is still kind of bullying him, right? Like, he just keeps going after him, and the Grinch winds up kind of like Al Qaeda. He was
funny
abused
you
by.
Said that. Continue though, please.
He, like when you think about it, Al Qaeda was kind of created in a way by the United States, right? And then they abuse, they were getting revenge in the end because we create kind of these soldiers by abusing these people in other countries, and that's how terrorists become a thing a lot of times. By doing that. And so the Grinch, by being abused by the people of Whoville, he decides to get revenge and become like a terrorist later on when he's an adult. So, I mean, obviously that's a bit of a stretch, and, I'm being somewhat humorous with it. But, you can kind of see the comparisons between, being mistreated like that and growing up to want revenge. And that's what the Grinch is doing, especially in the 2000 version. He's out to get these people.
Can we just say that the Grinch is Donald Trump? No, I'm kidding. That
no.
But it's so funny you said that because in my own notes I wrote the Grinch is a homegrown terrorist who unites a community with his attack.
See, that's funny.
Yeah, except this one is homegrown. Now, another thing I want to talk about, because it's popular in every single film, they have their own version of "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." And yep. I made it a point to look up when they play the song in each movie.
Nice.
So in the 1966 version, they play it while he's stealing Christmas. In the 2000 version, they play it while he's planning to steal Christmas, while he's getting the costume together and getting the sleigh ready and turning Max into a reindeer, spray painting all the metal that they're going to put on the side of the buses in order to go get Andy from the gun shop, all that stuff. And then,
nice Donald that reference.
Thank you. And in the most big look at my penis move ever in 2018, they play it in the beginning of the movie. They play it during the opening credits.
They want you to know he's a bad motherfucker.
They
right
do.
Off the bat.
And each time they try and I think they try and add a little more color to the song, because the first time they just had the dude singing, and then the second time in the Jim Carrey version, they kind of throw in these wicked jazz riffs in the middle of the song, and then Tyler the Creator did the 2018 version. It's a full rap song that they do, and I didn't actually see any outrage over that, and I was pleasantly surprised, but. Also, I might not have been looking for it. I'm sure there was a Breitbart article they tried to make the Grinch black.
I feel like nobody saw this version. That's why.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty surprised because I mean I knew about it, obviously because they were doing like so. Despite the fact that in 2000 they talk about Max as Rudolph rejecting the consumerism that his nose represents with Christmas time, the Grinch in 2018 was all over as many products as he could be. He was involved in Hyundai. He had billboards all over Los Angeles. I'm gonna put something in the show notes. It actually has like a good supercut that shows all of the different commercials that the 2018 Grinch was involved in. But I knew about it also because I listened to Kevin Smith's podcast Fat Man Beyond, and he also has another one called Smodcast, and he actually interviewed the director Scott Mosier, who is like a lifelong friend of Kevin Smith. So
Nice.
so I was like, oh shit, yeah, Scott Mosier's doing this. I'm definitely gonna go see it. Kevin talks good about him, and Dee likes the Grinch. It'll be a good chance to go to the movies. So I was one of the few, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, so the 2018 version does keep that message of, anti-consumerism. And Cindy Lou Who in particular, like, her whole goal is to get her, find happiness and make her mom not be lonely anymore, doesn't care about presents. But it's funny that, when you think about it, they're spending all this money to advertise the film. It's consumerism, right? They want people to go and see it so they can make money. So it is pretty interesting, that a film with that kind of message is pushing that hard to like down people's throats, much like, Christmas and shopping go hand in hand.
It's so funny because I mentioned in the Christmas Carol episode how Dickens put a lot of bells and whistle on the novelization of the story, of actually like creating the physical book with the pictures being painted and everything. But that drove up the price so much that the very people it was meant to enfranchise didn't necessarily have access to the book. And, in trying to tell, and similarly, the Grinch, in trying to tell a story of anti-consumerism, if you want to read it as anti-capitalism, you can. That in creating a story that tries to push those values has to feed into them in order to succeed. In order to be a successful story, they do have to advertise. They do have to feed into the same consumerism in which they are also criticizing.
Yeah, I mean, it started as a book, though, right? And, a children's book at that. So I think probably Dr. Seuss's message there was probably easier to get across without huge amounts of advertising. But, once you adapt it to a major Hollywood film, you kind of change the whole dynamic of this story and of this production. So, it becomes something totally different than what was probably originally intended.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but did the original book go into like Cindy Lou Who also claiming that, it was a bit much the way they celebrated Christmas? Because they really lean into that in the 2000 version, but I can't recall from the book. Now, I didn't read it that much or that recently either. However, my wife was reading it out loud to the dog, and while I was listening to that, I don't recall Cindy Lou Who being the one to kind of bring up how messed up, the spirit of Christmas is now with everyone going wild to buy stuff.
No, I mean, it's a short book. It's really short. It's a children's book. The animated film is an exact adaptation of it. That's only 26 minutes. So I don't think they had the time really to delve into that. I think it's more of just the Who's coming together and loving, the spirit of Christmas, even as the Grinch steals all their presents. That kind of, gets that message across. It's simplified in the original, text. And then obviously they to pad it and make the movie a little bit longer, they had to go into it more in the 2000 and 2018 versions.
Now, in the 2018 version, do you recall how they came to their conclusion that Christmas is more about family and less about less about presents? Because I don't actually recall it that well in the 2018 version.
I think it doesn't it kind of just happen the way it does in the original? They
Wait, which one did you watch?
I think I watched the 2018 version and the original. So, like, I know the mother says to Cindy Lou Who that, Christmas isn't about presents because Cindy Lou Who's so upset that she was trumped by Santa Claus. or the Grinch posing as Santa Claus, and she couldn't get her mom the present she wanted to so bad. 'Cause the whole movie, she's working to do this. She's trying to catch Santa Claus so she can confront him and beg him to help her mom. And her mom's like, listen, you're like the most, wonderful daughter I could have ever asked for. Christmas isn't about giving presents, it's about being together and just being happy. And I think all the Who's kind of mimic that same thought process. And the Grinch realizes that, he was wrong. He had already kind of started to come to that conclusion a bit when he met Cindy Lou Who, but seeing this not ruin their Christmas is when, he has that epiphany moment. And his heart grows 2 sizes larger. But so I think, it's Cindy Lou Who's mom who kind of emphasizes to her, and all the other Who's realize this as well.
Do we hold the Grinch accountable in a court of law for his crimes? Or no? What's your opinion? I mean, breaking and entering. I
mean, in our society, we probably... ACAB, bro. Fuck that.
In our society, the Grinch would be taking those toys and giving them to socioeconomically underprivileged kids, right?
In our world, the Grinch would be shot for not being white. So that's probably what would happen.
That's
in
true.
the real
That's
world.
true. He had a candy cane, and they were like, "Put the gun down." And he's like, "Please, it wasn't bad. I don't."
Oh God, not the Jim Carrey one. But like in that version, obviously not. I don't know if they. I think there's police in the 2000 version, but I don't know. If they ever
but they give him a break because it's Christmas.
They do.
And because he said he was sorry.
Plus the mayor was a
he
fucking
apologizes.
dick to him. So
yeah, the mayor's corrupt. That son of a bitch.
Yeah, he really is.
That
And
mayor's
the
just like
Grinch
Donald
gets his
Trump.
girl back in 2000.
Wait, what did you say?
The Grinch gets his girl back, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
She was in love with him the whole time, but, couldn't be with him because he was exiled, and they're finally able to be together.
Because it was an interracial marriage.
Happy.
Yeah, there's a whole racial undertone in the marriage, of course.
There is. And in 2018 version, he goes to apologize to the town, and he says to Cindy Lou Who's mom that without Cindy Lou Who, he never would have realized he was wrong, and that, she's special and kind of awoke this in him. And, she's like, yeah, cool, join us for dinner. And they all have this great, dinner and happy moment. And the Grinch is like, woo, yeah, Christmas. It's, it's very heartwarming and all that.
I mean, thinking about that, when you say it out loud, that's kind of like, a similar message that, that I've been, that I've pushed a couple other times in this podcast. The idea of like, we may not understand our enemies, but, within reason, we may have to reach across and try to at least appeal to them in some way, so that way we can all work together toward a better world. Now,
I'm really glad you brought that up. I was actually going to mention that.
Yeah, go for it.
It's something that we see today. Again, that same idea. Sometimes you have to work with the people you don't necessarily like or agree with on everything to kind of show them the way. I think so many times, especially like among leftists, that they shit all over anyone who has a difference of opinion rather than trying to educate them. And it can be really difficult, right, to educate someone who doesn't want to learn or wants to fight against you. But, if you can get through to them, if you can make them understand and you guys can find a common ground, it's amazing what you can accomplish. And I think that's kind of, an important lesson there as well.
Yeah, like I think, I wouldn't dare go to like a Blue Lives Matter rally that they have every other weekday on Long Island, or one of the, the Trump parades, because, those people might be a bit too far gone. But, if you do come across somebody who might lean conservative or whatever, in your own personal life, there might be a way to find a common ground and just explain like, hey, like, your life doesn't suck because of the immigrants. Your life sucks because of the capitalists. And, because that's, once again, that is the long and the short of it. I'm afraid and of these people taking my rights, my privilege, my jobs, my money, my home, whatever it is.
Yeah. Your country, your life, whatever it is. It's, if you can get the message across that that's not what's actually happening. It's amazing the results you can get, it really is.
And I think this is the first time we really hear the Grinch acknowledge, too, that she is the reason that he became better. He didn't just become better on his own. He didn't just become better from watching a bunch of people chant, which was originally what happened. So, obviously we got to protest, we got to take to the streets. but to what end is that going to change minds on a smaller scale? I guess on an individual scale is what I'm trying to say.
You're saying like this is a message saying you can do that or you can't.
I'm saying it's a message that evolves. I'm saying that, like,
okay.
if we look through, like, if we took a 2020 lens and looked at the 66 one, you could say, like, yes, all of us, you know what? Let me spin it this way, right? Peaceful protest, just getting out there and chanting is the best way to spread a message and change minds. And Cindy Lou Who in the later versions requires a more personal touch to see someone face to face, get to recognize them, see them as a human, and then be able to change them from, in that regard. Was that a little
Okay? Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was actually going to ask you, do you think that the message gets diluted at all in the later versions, like that it becomes overly complicated and isn't as simple and powerful as it was in the original?
Yeah, I guess it leaves less up to fate and talks more about individual choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's kind of how I feel too.
I don't know if I can say whether or not the message gets diluted, because in changing that ending, I think they change the message a bit. Like, so, and I'm not saying one message is right or one message is wrong. Like, I do like the idea that the Who's, just had the spirit of Christmas within them the whole time, and that they hadn't been a part of the people who abused the Grinch. The fact that they didn't give him an origin actually made everyone in that story a lot more forgivable.
Yeah, agreed.
And later on, we see that he forgives the mayor, but the mayor's the guy who humiliated him twice. Like it was all the the swingers who left who while it's great to see non-monogamous representation in popular media, it was still, they were the people who neglected him and let him become that monster who would later take them, attack them later on, I guess. And I guess in that regard, the idea is, just like you said, be careful of the villains that you create while you're obsessed with your greed, with your need for gain, because eventually those villains will come back. And it has kind of a Fight Club premise to it also, right? Because he was a domestic terrorist, Tyler Durden, and he says it's only when you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. And when all these Who's finally have nothing, they recognize what's important to them.
Well said.
So Fight Club, Rob Zombie's Halloween, and the Grinch. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think sometimes, while I do like these versions, you don't always need that sympathetic factor, because sometimes people don't have these horrible things happen to them and they still have the wrong mindset.
Yeah, some people are just fucking assholes because literally the way they were raised, and not like, bad things happen to them to make them believe that way. It's just, I was raised with these values.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of nice to think there's hope that maybe you could reach across the aisle and convince them that they're wrong or show them a better way. And that's, that is another strong message that the original kind of puts out there, and I like about it.
Since we're going to the end, I'll probably end up throwing this in cutscenes, but did I tell you about that kid that I met who was like into like art house films and comic books, and he actually did some art, like really nice, sensitive guy, and it turned out later on that he is like a hardcore Trump supporter?
Oh no.
I didn't tell you about him.
No,
like
not at all.
He literally has a history similar to me, like in the fact that like he works with the special needs and with the special needs population, and I was like, wow, like what a great dude. Like we really we met once through a mutual friend and had a really incredible bromance, and I think I should have started realizing where he stood, because like when I first met him, I was like I adhere to communist ideals. My thing is we the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, in that the working class should be the ones who control the means of production and the wealth, and should be privy to everything that they help create. It shouldn't be a pyramid scheme, basically that. And he was like, oh, I respect that, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, at that function, everybody was getting mad at me for saying I wasn't going to vote Biden, except for him. And I'm like, I wonder why that is. So
man.
Yeah, and so then when Kyle Rittenhouse kills 2 people in Kenosha, he starts saying like, "Well, it wasn't self-defense, blah blah blah," and
Oh no.
he was there protecting property, and I'm like, who gives a fuck about property? Property isn't aren't people's lives. Property can be replaced. This is a country that was built on violent protests. This is a country that was built on the destruction of property. You talk about the Boston Tea Party, you talk about the Revolutionary War, that wasn't legal. Like, I'm throwing all this stuff at him, and he's like, that's actually a pretty good point. I didn't think of it that way. Like,
Hey.
yeah, I mean, we haven't actively talked about the whole fact that he's definitely a Trump supporter. Like, he's not just a Republican or like one of those like, I'm fiscally conservative, like libertarian dudes. Like, he's an outright Trump supporter. We haven't talked about that. I just always react at all of his Instagram stories. When I see anything involving pro Trump stuff, because it's not my job to have that conversation with him. I'm not that close to him.
Of course. But, interesting.
Yeah, but where did that tie into the Grinch? Did it tie into the Grinch at all?
I don't know.
Anyway, I have a fun fact about the 2000 version. Did you know that the makeup was actually so uncomfortable to have on that Jim Carrey learned techniques from people who teach soldiers to resist torture?
Wow, that's
Yeah, because like it was all like
fucked up.
it was all like practical stuff, which I love practical stuff. I thought in that way the 2000 film was very inventive, like you said. It was very stylized. For better or worse, you might not have liked the makeup on the people, but they definitely had a vision, and they were pretty consistent with it for the most part.
Agreed.
Except for Cindy Lou Who. But yeah, because like the contacts he had to have on covered almost his whole eyeball, like almost the whole front of it. The makeup you had to be in for hours at a time. Everything was skin tight. It was like disgusting.
That's kind of cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, in their world, I don't know. I would say he did do breaking and entering. He did
Yeah.
he did commit grand larceny.
Animal abuse.
Yeah. So who knows? That's not up to us. That's up to the Who courts to decide in the trial of the Grinch. Another fun fact I do have it's not a fact. It was kind of a theory about why the Grinch hates the Who's. It was in this ridiculous video that I didn't listen to all the theories, just this one. Just a few of them, but then they started getting ridiculous. But this one said that because we established that the Who's exist in Horton Hears a Who, and the only way for them to not be killed is to constantly be heard. That they're always singing and making noise because they can't die. Like, they can't let themselves be killed. And the Grinch hates it. He hates them always making noise in order to stay alive. That was a theory about it.
That's a dark theory.
Yeah. And so in doing and because of them being so loud, they have hearing loss, and that's why he was able to sneak throughout all of Whoville and not be heard at night.
That's a great theory. I love theories like that.
Yeah, right.
One thing I found curious was, they mentioned Santa Claus in all these versions, and yet they never prove that he exists. So, I guess you would have to come to the conclusion that he does not exist in this world.
Yeah, you must, because surely Santa would have stopped him.
Yeah, I mean, he was there that night, and he never saw Santa dropping off presents.
That's a good point. At least in Nightmare Before Christmas, they established that Santa exists.
Yeah, he's a real being, but not in the Grinch. No, they just get the Grinch. There's no Santa Claus. There is no God. There's no Santa Claus.
But yeah, so thanks a lot for putting up with me on this, Ty. This is going to be a very interesting episode.
It is. I think it's got a great message. It's a simple message, right? And I think all three versions do touch upon it. And it's just, I think it's important for people to remember that Christmas is not just about giving presents. It's about, a sense of camaraderie, and helping your fellow man and woman, and just being,
and women too, Alfred. Women
a good person. And, in a time where, we're at the end of 2020 into 2021, when people are, dying of COVID and starving and don't have relief, and our government is fighting over a stimulus package. It's
whether to give breadcrumbs or one slice of bread to the American people.
And, people are from all sides are fighting and disagreeing, and unlikely allies are forming. It's a weird time, but it's important to remember to help each other out. We've all had a difficult time, but if you're lucky enough to help someone out, please do. Whether it's a person or an animal or whatever it is, we all live on this earth, and we all have to deal with the consequences of our actions. So make sure you do the right thing, and you'll probably feel better about yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful message. And during a COVID Christmas season, and just this time of year in general, like you said, at the end of 2020, it is important to look at the message of a story like How the Grinch Stole Christmas, because because they have a Christmas that's unlike any other they've had before, and that's what we have had to have at this point. And a lot of people have had something different than they're used to, but they still knew that just being with the people you love, those of us who are fortunate to have those people, that that's really what made the holiday, and it wasn't necessarily the gifts or lack thereof, especially when we're all, when a lot of us are unemployed or underemployed during the pandemic.
Yeah, and a lot of us couldn't be together. My brother, he FaceTime Christmas with us, so unfortunately we couldn't all be there in person with each other. But I think just being there as best we could, and knowing we're there for each other helps us get through this.
And it would help us if anyone listening decided to rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Leaving a 5-star review really helps us out. If you find somebody, friend or family who you think would enjoy the podcast, please let them know to listen to it. You could find us on YouTube, where you can subscribe and like our videos, and also find special behind-the-scenes content and outtakes that we don't put anywhere else. We only put them on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod. Find us on Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast. Email us at PolitiPopcast@gmail.com, and you can find our show notes and sources at PolitiPopPodcast.wordpress.com. As always, special thanks to all of you, the listeners, and to Antonia Chava for logo design.
Reach out to us. Let us know what you guys want us to do next. I think that would be a fun thing to do this year. Tell us what you want us to talk about and review, and let us know what you want to hear.
Yeah, we will definitely take suggestions through social media or through email. If you really want to have your voice heard, you can support us via Patreon, where for as little as $3 a month, you can help support the podcast and gain access to exclusive content there as well. Also, I'll make sure I put something in the show notes about how Dr. Seuss is problematic. We didn't talk about it here, but there's definitely something in his past. I know for a fact that he was banging his mistress while his wife was sick, and then married his mistress right after she died.
Every one of these motherfuckers is problematic. Don't worship people.
Yeah, worship them. He was racist too, and if he wasn't, then I'll cut this part out. Here's what I'll say. Oh, it turns out Dr. Seuss wasn't racist, and if he was, of course Dr. Seuss was racist.
Yeah.
There we go. So we're covering our bases here. But Happy New Year to all of you listening. Hopefully 2021 will be in some way better than 2020.
Yes.
And, thank you for listening and giving us a really great year of at least podcasting. This has been awesome for us as a way to reconnect as friends, and as a way to have some creative outlet to vent through and let off steam through. This is, and to know that people are actually listening, that we're not getting a lot, but also we're getting at least between 200 and 300 downloads a month.
That's great.
Divide that by 4, there's at least, some people listening per week, and that really
awesome.
means a lot to us. So thanks a lot. And like Ty said, definitely reach out. For the PolitiPop podcast, I have been Mike Booch.
I've been Ty.
And remember, no matter what you're watching, reading, listening to, never stop thinking, never stop learning, and always remember to read between the lines.
And scene.
There we go.